So, one of the most effective things that an abuser does is they weaponize the victim against themselves. And the reason why it's such like a genius move in a villain way is because there are things that if the abuser does it, it's illegal. But if you do it to yourself, it's not. Or they're not necessarily in trouble for it. So if the abuser hits you, if the abuser cuts you, that's, you can call it a popo. And the police will get involved. That's assault. When we do it to ourselves, there's often a lot of leeway there. And then you're going to be encouraged to go toward therapy, counseling, maybe inpatient treatment places, which, as far as the abuser is concerned, may be a win for them since it's very jail adjacent in terms of your freedom and ability to do things, and as well as outside people thinking that you're unsafe and unstable. So when they can get you to say the hurtful things about yourself and to yourself, they can get you to hurt yourself physically. They've leveraged you against yourself in a way that gives them a level of plausible deniability in terms of being responsible for the harm. The other thing that happens is that the abuser, as much as they might try, the abuser's not with you 24/7. You are with you 24/7. So when the abuser is planting seeds, those seeds of abuse, of the things that they're saying and the things that they're doing to you, especially if you're a child, and the abuser is like a caregiver that you can't escape from, it's very hard to unknow things once you know them. It's hard to unsee them once you've seen them. They are now available in your mind to be brought up at any time. And the more they capture your mind and the more they capture your emotions, the more they make you feel shame about yourself, even if that has nothing truly to do with you. If they can make you feel shame about yourself, that you are deeply wrong and broken, you should be ashamed, you should feel shame, you'll start torturing yourself because you think you deserve it. So for victims, understanding that when the abuser can capture your interiority, your inner self, your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, when they become the center of your universe, they have now magnified their ability to abuse you past what anyone might normally have. If some Joe Schmo on the street, says something like harmful to you, well, that doesn't matter. It's a one-time thing. You keep going. There's no like power behind it because they don't know you. They don't know who you are. But people who are close to you, they know you. They know all of your insecurities or potential insecurities, and they might have even installed them if they were your parents. Now, that said, one way to swing the pendulum to the other side, and I did this and I do not recommend it, was I just went around talking myself down. I figured if I did it before anybody else could, that they would have no power. However, I was speaking those things over myself in my own voice, which anyone who knows anything about subliminals, if you ever do subliminals in your own voice, they're like, oh, so much more effective. So your brain hears you saying those things about yourself. So as a protective mechanism to kind of take the power away from people around you, we've taken the power, but then we've used it against ourselves. So I do not recommend that. That was, not my best option. Don't recommend. You end up with very low self-esteem when you do that. So like, for example, when my son was little and we were talking about like, how do you deal with people who are basically coming at you in a way to make you feel bad about yourself? I taught him, to the best of my ability, the art of trash talking. You're a kid, you're in school, and you got bullies, coming after you. And what I always taught him was, like, we don't hit but you can hit back like in defense of yourself. But like, again, that forced discussion that I'm having where it's self-defense only to get yourself safe. You don't then like go so hard with it. But a little light response, a light defense, knowing how to trash talk, puts you in a position where, you're saying like, I'm going to advocate on my own behalf. This works with outside people. When you're in a family, when you're trapped with these people, when you're in a marriage, when this is your life, there's nowhere to go. You have to develop a different kind of coping mechanism, which is basically you build yourself up so much that whatever they say does not reach your inner self, your inner layer. You prevent them from basically being a virus and taking over you and then replicating themselves within you. So when I talk to child victims of abuse and they're in a situation they can't escape, I essentially give them the recommendations I would give to a prisoner of war, a POW. You are creating a space inside of your mind where you exist and you can be yourself. And you can make it as vivid as you want to. It can be like its own little world. But you're in that space when you can have like time to yourself. You go to that space and then you in your mind enact like all the ways that you would normally be in the world, if not for having to compress yourself. That can go too far into maladaptive daydreaming, but creating that stronghold in your mind where you can exist as a person. So key, because you want to be able to hold on to who you are, even if these people are saying things at you. And, I'll let children know, like sometimes you may have to pretend to go along with what they're saying, or even in the moment, maybe make yourself believe the things you're saying, but you always come back to that space of you-ness, that space where you exist. And you go, that was a character I had to put on. That's not the real me. Here's the real me. So a lot of the moral injury that victims experience is a result of them being tricked or pushed or coerced into doing things against themselves. That's part of like the humiliation ritual of it. That's how they emphasize their power over you, is by putting you in positions where you are humiliated and you can't stand up for yourself and you can't do anything about it. So they beat you and then they walk off and they go get something from the kitchen and they go on and you say nothing, right? They are exercising their power over you, and by making you swallow the humiliation, you know it too. And that further reinforces their power over you. So if you, in that situation, for example, you're like, I had to not say anything. They are reinforcing this status where they can enact violence on me and they can say things to me. But that's not, and I did what I needed to do to stay alive, but that's not who I am. That's not true. And so you can go in your mind. A lot of victims, child victims of abuse, do kind of like naturally come to this coping mechanism where they then go into their mind and they say all of the things they would have said in that moment to the person. They stand up for themselves, right? And the brain, that's why media is so powerful, because when a brain sees something or thinks something, it can't necessarily tell the difference between a memory and something you imagined. So the imagination piece is actually quite powerful. Use it with, discretion, obviously. Now, sometimes where child victims run into problems is when what they're thinking shows on their face. So the thinking of like, I don't agree with this, and you're a bad person, whatever it is they're thinking, you're wrong, and it shows on the face. Then you can run into problems. That was me. I had all the. You could tell what I was thinking. It was on my face. So my dad was not, he would beat me harder. Anyway, so, that's why so many of us get the resting neutral face, RNF. But you reserve that. You reserve that for when you are in the place where you can be and you recognize that the things you're doing to survive are not who you are. that's part of the abuse. The part of the abuse is getting you to betray yourself. Part of the abuse is making you humiliate yourself. And, the worse somebody is, the more they hate goodness, the more they want to destroy it, the more they're offended by it. So, for example, you could be a person who's not really like, let's say you're not into drugs, but the abuser is. Abusers will say, or bullies even, they'll say things like, well, you think you're better than me, right? And you're just like, no, I'm just making a personal choice for myself. It has nothing to do with you. I wasn't making any kind of a judgment. They think you're making a judgment because they make judgments. And they think you're making that specific judgment because maybe they know that's not their best choice. So there's a lot of their abuse is confabulated in their own mind because of how they assume you are thinking and how you are making decisions. And they do that, they assume that you're abusing and abusive because that's who they are. That's how they think. That's what they assume that you're doing. They do not have the ability to, what's it called? Theory of mind. Children develop theory of mind. It's the ability to recognize I'm an individual, distinct person. You are an individual, distinct person. I may know something you don't know, or you may know something that I don't know. We don't know the same things. Therefore, we don't necessarily have the same opinions, the same thoughts. We don't approach the world in the same way. Abusers have a pathological inability or lack of desire to see things from other people's perspective. They'll mimic it for purposes of manipulation. But at the end of the day, their worldview is selfish on who they are, what they want, how they think people are, what they think people are doing. And then they get you, they colonize you, they like a virus, they take over your body, and they make them the center of the world. And you obsessed with how they think. You end up completely oriented to this other person. And therefore, when you hurt yourself, it has even more power than if they did it directly. Anyway, I hope this makes sense. And I'll talk to you next time.